All right, boys, last color. Let's go. Order is the name of the game today, and again, you know the spiel. Seal of Unity. We already covered the seals in all of the other colors, but the short of it is, maybe not for every deck investing a card into is really what they want, but a lot of decks down the line will like this card. It's a good effect. We know that from the Kaiser legend. So, getting into the real stuff here. 1 energy gear, symbol of the Solari. If a combat where you are the attacker ends in a tie, recall all units instead. Okay. This seems very specific. I'm not sure. Right now, I really don't think how this would benefit you like too much. Like if you use your turn to attack, it's only a tie. All units are recalled, and then next turn your opponent can just conquer again. Sounds not too great, but there has to be, or in the next sets has to come out like a strategy around this that makes this make sense. And yeah, we'll have to see. With the Solari, obviously makes you think of the stun strategy kind of, but I don't know why. Yeah, that actually makes sense. You stun your enemy, they don't deal damage in combat, you just can't kill them because you attack with a smaller unit, but that survives and all units are recalled and you achieve nothing. Unless you can move back to it afterwards, maybe, I don't know. Weird card, man. 2 energy, 1 power, Cull the Weak. Each player kills one of their units. Yeah. For like a token strategy, especially against like slower decks that are trying to go tall, this seems like a good, just like a good spell, like a good removal option. Like you can also like thin out your opponent's board beforehand, then use it later on when your opponent has to pick one of a unit that's on the bigger side. Yeah, decent card, but it's not a crazy good removal, but it is a solid removal option, at least in certain matchups. 2 energy to my Daring Poro Assault. Okay, yeah, especially right now in the beginning, this might just be a solid minion for like very proactive strategies. Although I do find it interesting to think about, is assault, it's like buffing on attack. Is that actually something slower or more proactive decks want? And again, with defense, is that something that's better for proactive decks or better for slow decks? It's really interesting and might not even be related to that at all, because if you think about it, aggressive decks that flood the board early will typically tend to like just conquer battlefields early on and then will try to hold it, where like shield is and like buffs for defenders are actually a lot better, whereas slow decks will tend to be behind on board and then have to play into established battlefields, making them the attacker. It's not personally how I would intuit from like the wording that those things would fit into the strategies, but it might just be the case. Like, yeah, maybe this is actually something slower decks more like, but at that point, do they want to run a 2-drop? I don't know. Might also just be specific to certain deck strategies. Might not have to do anything, whether or not slow or fast decks like Assault or Shield more. I'm losing the point here a little bit. Solid card. Definitely has some chances seeing play, especially early on. 2 energy, spell Facebreaker. My set impression is not good. Hidden action. Stun a friendly unit and an enemy unit at the same battlefield. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Stun a small unit from yours, a big unit from your enemy. Maybe if your enemy moves, if you have one unit at your battlefield, your opponent moves into it to contest that, can stun both, keep them from conquering. Also has like hidden and action utility. I don't know. I feel like this is the kind of spell that rarely feels insanely great, but just has a lot of utility and a lot of situations where it's pretty good. It's just a good option to include. 2 energy, gear, Forge of the Future. When you play this, play a 1 recruit unit token at your base, kill this, recycle up to 4 cards from trashes. It can also be enemy trashes. Thinking about the future, that can also like hinder your opponent's strategies. If we think we had it last time with Chaos, the Harrowing and the other thing that bring back big threats from the trash can be interesting to disrupt things like that. And I think, yeah, this is not that this, when this is killed, you can just decide to kill this. So it kind of kills itself to recycle that. Definitely interesting. When you play it right away, even in token strategies, it feels kind of bad. 2 energy for just a 1 might token, really bad. So the recycling has to be an upside, maybe. Like I said, decks running out of cards in the deck, so they want to put some stuff back, maybe like later on only put the good stuff back into the deck. We could definitely get to that point in the future. I don't think we're quite there yet. I'm not sure if recycling from your trash actually has a lot of impact right now. I don't think so. So that card isn't particularly good now, but has some interesting, let's call it interesting, potential use options for the future though. 2 energy, 1 power spell, Hidden Blade. Hidden action, kill unit at a battlefield. Its controller draws 2. Okay, this can remove anything, which for 2 energy, 1 power is pretty good. This is pretty darn good. It's also really good tempo wise. It has hidden and action as utility things. The big downside is that its controller draws 2 cards. If you're a slow deck against, if you're playing a fast deck against a slow deck, they might have card advantage anyways. At that point, them drawing 2 extra cards, yeah, may give them additional options, but oftentimes won't matter too much. You also have the option to kill your own unit to draw 2, if that's a unit you actually want to die because it has a good death knell, sorry, because it has a good death knell. That is quite the strong play. So that might be, especially once we get better removal options, that might be the main use for this card. But it's also like, as a removal, there are definitely situations where you still like that. It's pretty nice. You can, like, even if you have just a small unit you don't really need, but you need some card draw, you can use it like that. Again, I quite like cards like these that are not overbearingly strong in any situation, but do have like very interesting flexibility to them, and I feel like this is one of those. 2 energy, 1 power, salvage action. You may kill a gear, draw 1. Okay. This is a really good card if either, like, as a side deck option, again, if we have decks that are very focused on gears, that are very reliant on them. Aurora is the one that comes to mind the most, that just at the end of every turn brings out a big threat. This is really strong there, but also again, if we have gears that we want to have killed, that gain additional effects from that, that's also pretty strong. The fact that it's an action, your opponent might have like a gear, I don't know, just fantasy, not sure if that exists. I don't have the gears too much in mind right now, but your opponent might have something like that just adds 1 to all attackers or defenders or whatever, and then in combat you just remove that, change the way the battle works out in your favor, things like that. It's a pretty specific card. It's like for or against pretty specific strategies, but in those, like in or against those strategies, it seems pretty darn good. 2 energy, 1 might, soaring scout, death knell, channel 1 rune, exhausted. Yeah, this just a solid card, like solid ramp option. The especially nice in like some mid-range or even slower token decks, this providing a body as well, but even then for like slower decks that do not want to do a whole lot early on, that are really wanting to get to the big drops, this is like something nice to do on turn 2, like gives you at least some board presence, might score you 1 point with the conquer, and then actually contributes to your real game plan. Pretty good card. Next up, 2 energy, 2 might, Trifarian Glory Seeker Legion. When you play me, buff me. If I don't have a buff, I get a +1 buff. Get the effect if you've played another card this turn. Yeah, we all know that. Yeah. I mean, this is obviously good in like buff strategies, but this is also just a pretty good card in aggressive decks that maybe then like either when going second on turn 1 with 3 energy, just play a card for 1, and then this another unit, like 2 energy 3 might unit basically on top of that, or on turn 4 play another 2 drop, then this get a lot of stats into play early. This just for these kind of decks that are looking to vomit their hand on the board, to go relatively wide with just a lot of smaller minions. This seems like a pretty good option. 2 energy, Gear Vanguard Helm. When a buffed friendly unit dies, buff another friendly unit. Okay, this is interesting, just kind of passing the buff along. Again, particularly useful for buff strategies that are looking to go pretty wide, but since most units can only have 1 buff, I imagine that unless we're playing with just Lee Sin that can have multiple buffs, and trying to make him as strong as possible and kind of protect the queen, kind of, right? Queen Lee Sin. But aside from that, buff strategies will very, very likely have to focus on going relatively wide, and like keeping your losses at a minimum there if some of your things get cleared. Actually seems pretty decent. The question is if those kind of decks can afford to put 2 energy to put into this, but I feel like once we get to like turn 3, turn 4, they might just have this left over, try to get a little bit more staying power there. One thing to worry about at that point though is if at that point maybe like bigger clears come into the picture that may remove like all of your units, or like a big chunk of your units, so that you can't even pass on all buffs and lose a lot of them. Yeah. Kind of depends on how exactly the buff decks work out and how exactly they line up into the other decks in the metagame, but I can definitely see a world where this is where this is a solid card. I wouldn't want to go further because it really doesn't It doesn't do anything like on its own, anything proactively, right? It just tries to keep some of your resources around is what it does. It's not like, if you're not established, this does nothing, and that may be the breaking part for like that may be the issue for this kind of card. 3 energy spell back-to-back reaction. Give to friendly units +2 this turn. Okay, if you have 2 friendly units, this is pretty good. Just as is. And this obviously tends to make it better for decks that are going a little bit wider. But 2 units really isn't that much to make this like just good. So I imagine that you can see a little bit more from this. One issue of the card is that if you have like 2 units at a battlefield and your opponent goes there, you might not have like the decision, like if you could just give 4 to a unit, you could easier decide which unit you want to keep around, so that your opponent can only kill just the one and not the other. With this, either none of the player really decides which unit stays around depending on how things line up, because both become too big, or your opponent keeps that decision. That's a slight issue of the card, but I feel like not paying a power cost for something like this, for a relatively big swing in a combat trick, sounds just very solid. 3 energy baited hook. Pay 1 energy and 1 power. Exhausted, kill a friendly unit. Look at the top 5 cards of your main deck. You may play a unit from among them that has might up to 1 more than the killed unit. Ignoring its cost, you don't have to pay power, then recycle the rest. And this is a card with a lot of potential. Like, if we have like something that's producing like smallish units that have kind of an immediate benefit, like an on-play effect, and then are a little bit understated, just going into this to bring out something else can already be fine. Where this shines though is with units that buff their might once they hit the board. The biggest the biggest one to mention here is Draven Showboat. Already had a look at this. He increases his might by your points. So if we get into like the mid game, this is very easily like a 7-8 plus might card. But when you look at it from like when you pick it up from your deck, it's just 3 might. You only have to kill a 2 might unit with baited hook to be able to bring out that Draven, and cheating like a, I don't know, 10 might unit out with that, it can be quite the ridiculous play. And then with another couple of units that, like Draven is obviously the prime example, but there are a couple of other units that have some smaller buffs that you might be able to bring out with this. So definitely a card with potential that, together with Draven, like a Darius deck, you should already experiment with. Maybe there's something there, but with a lot more potential even than in the future. Just getting something that has an immediate payoff with like 2 might, I don't know, draws a card, summons another minion, and then you kill it off, bring out a Draven, seems very strong. If that happens, that's insane. The question is just if a deck like that can keep up, like can be strong outside of that. Like just that synergy alone doesn't happen often enough to just make a deck, right? At least not right now. In the future, like I could see like strategies very focused on this though. 3 energy, Call to Glory. Reaction: as you play this, you may spend a buff as an additional cost. If you do, ignore this spell's cost, giving a +3 this turn. Okay, so Outside of a buff strategy, I feel like this is still kind of solid. Again, because this does not cost power. It's actually quite a nice reaction to do. If you spend a buff for this, this is really strong though. Especially if you have like a unit that's not involved in the current showdown, that you remove the buff from to add 3 to a unit that is in a showdown. So without any open energy, you could just make a +3 swing at a battlefield. That is a little bit specific. Oftentimes this will just be a +2 swing, which for free is still pretty nice. Almost for free. Like technically you do lose the buff, so on the next turn, for the like after this buff ends, once the next turn starts, you will technically be down 1 might overall, but for changing the combat, that's definitely worth it. So in buff decks, we will see this for certain yellow decks that may not have enough reactions. Inherently, aside for this, they might even play this without a lot of buffs. But yeah, just a solid card. Though this, and I've said that during when we looked at Lee Sin's other buff cards, like in that color as well. This is not the kind of payoff that makes the buff deck. This is like a nice addition to that, but I don't think whether or not this card around will be the deciding factor whether or not that strategy is viable. Like it's a solid card, but not that good. 3 energy, 2 might, faithful manufacturer. When you play me, play a 1 recruit unit token here. So okay, if you play it immediately to a battlefield you control, the recruit will also join her there. And yeah, just 3 energy, 3 might, split up onto 2 bodies is solid, and strategies looking to go wide, to have payoffs for going wide, will appreciate this card. Karthus Eternal. 3 energy, 1 power, 3 might. Your death knell effects trigger an additional time. Okay. This is an effect with a lot of potential. This effect can be really strong if we get like just some really strong death knell effects, and even like 1 or 2 may be enough there. And this card also isn't that it's not that expensive that you like think that you can't imagine playing a death knell and then playing this afterwards to trigger the death knell twice immediately. It's also an additional time. It does not say twice, it's an additional time. If you control multiple of these, death knells will just proc 2, 3, 4 times. And it's also like, in a way, if we get like it's a strategy looking to vomit out like a lot of death knell minions early on, and then back it up with the Karthus, could also be like an interesting way to use this in a more tempo oriented strategy. So I've not seen enough good death knells yet, I think, but this is definitely a powerful effect that will definitely be relevant at some point. 3 energy, 3 might, Noxian Drummer. When I move to a battlefield, play a recruit unit token there. Yeah. Just right off the bat, 3 energy, 3 might, not too bad, right? And once this moves, it basically gets 2 might, it can generate a lot of advantage. Like, if your opponent cannot answer this, it can actually become quite overbearing. Something to note though is, without additional move effects, it obviously only works like every second turn. That might make it a little bit rough. But, well, just for 4 decks trying to go wide, just the 3 energy, 3 might that summons a token once may be good enough. But it is a little bit slow. And again, value it can generate over multiple turns is also really slow, with going only every second turn for the most part. So it definitely is a card that's interesting to decks going wide and could be good enough. I imagine though that there likely will, at least at some point relatively soon and within the next sets, be better options that are a little bit stronger, like a little bit more immediately. Next up, 3 energy, 1 power, 3 might, Shen Kinku. Reaction, ooh, reaction on a unit, that is nice, that's pretty cool. Shield 2 and tank. Oh, I like this. This really suits Shen. If you if you control a battlefield, your opponent moves there, you just bring him in there and defending. He's a 5 might unit, pretty strong for the cost, especially like coming out of nowhere. And then the tank may protect something, makes the battlefield a little bit more sticky. Yeah, pretty cool card. I'm not sure what kind of strategy this would like maybe probably a kind of strategy that wants to just move to one battlefield and keep that battlefield till the end, just win off of that. Very interesting card. Not something that like really defines a strategy or anything like that. This is not like a build around card, but I definitely see the vision here. I think it's pretty cool, and I can definitely see decks playing this as a combat trick, because it's definitely a pretty good combat trick. And even if you don't use it as that, just 3 energy, 1 power for like a 5 might defender with tank sounds pretty solid as well. 3 energy, 1 power, 3 might Vanguard Captain Legion. When you play me, play 2 1 might recruit unit tokens there. Yeah, so this, especially stat wise, is pretty darn strong. For the like, and putting that over 3 bodies for decks that really like that, like AoE buffs, whatever, it's really strong. But it has Legion, you have to play something else beforehand, and it costs a power for that. So this is not cheap, this is not like super straightforward to get. You have to do like work for it a little bit, and that might be reason enough that this is not for just not for any deck that's not like super focused on going wide. Those decks will still appreciate this card, I think, but this is a good thing, like this card being really strong there, but once you digress from like this very token-based strategies, it becomes a lot more difficult to use really quickly, even though it's a powerful card, and I like that about its design. Yeah. Next up for energy, 3 might Albus Ferris. When you play me, spend any number of buffs. For each buff spent, channel 1 unit, one rune exhausted. Okay, this is an interesting effect. So this kind of paves the way into a buff ramp strategy. Not too sure how that will work out. Doesn't seem like the kind of thing the buff decks we've seen so far really want to go into. We've also haven't seen like buff decks having like a really high cost to recycle units, really high power cost, things like that. Mostly you use the buffs to ignore these, right? A lot of the times, I kind of feel like. So there also isn't really the need to have this to just keep up a proficient rune count, right? I'm not quite sure. There like, this is a card that can ramp a lot, and that's always scary and something to keep in mind of, like when looking at other cards, when looking at future cards coming out. But I don't think this fits into just the regular buff strategies that we're looking for right now. 4 energy, 6 might, Cruel Patron. As an additional cost to play me, kill a friendly unit. This is just a good card. Like, for 4 energy, 6 might is really strong, and if you kill either a token or just something that wants to die, that has additional effects, this looks very strong. Yeah, that's just it. Just a good card. 4 energy, 4 might, Fiora Victorious. While I'm mighty, I have deflect, ganking, and shield. Okay, so you basically want to give it a buff, and then it's quite strong. Deflect, ganking, and shield makes it so, well, the ganking is kind of out of place there. Like with deflect and shield, this would be really good at like holding a battlefield, so you don't really want the the ganking doesn't make too much sense there. But assuming you can consistently buff this in a deck, it seems pretty good. It's also not too expensive to like think that it like this doesn't at 4 this doesn't need to have super immediate impact already. It's fine to have way to turn to get ready and put the buff on it and things like that at that point. Although it is obviously a lot better if you already control the battlefield, but even then, seems like a solid card for strategies that can consistently buffer up. Then Leona Determined, 4 energy, 1 power, 4 might, shield when I attack stun an enemy unit here. Okay, this I think is pretty good. It's a little bit anti-synergistic in the fact that it kind of wants to defend, but also has an on attack, which is yeah, kind of a little bit of a mismatch there, but just as an attacker, especially if you have like additional stun synergy and things like that, this does seem pretty threatening. This does seem quite threatening there. So yeah, the mismatch makes it feel kind of awkward, but overall I still think this is a pretty solid card. And artwork is as well. Looks Crown Guard, 4 energy, 2 might. Ooh, exhaust this reaction at 2, use only to play spells. Okay, this this is awkward. Obviously the effect is very powerful. We don't have to talk about that. This effect is very powerful, and in theory you only have to use it twice for this card to really make up for it. This is the kind of card you want to keep in your base for your opponent not to remove, to keep it around and get just a lot of value for spells. The issues with this card though is this enters exhausted. You can only start using the effect on your next turn, not even on the opponent's turn after playing that, on your next turn. And even if you keep this in base at 2 might, it seems very fragile, and I imagine that quite a few strategies, like even if it's a lot more difficult to answer something that is in the base, or 2 might, I feel like a lot of decks will still be able to do so, even if you don't commit it to a battlefield. And the investment at first for this is quite hefty. The first investment cost, like if you pay 4 for this and you don't get this to pay off, it feels very bad. That's so bad. And even if you do get it off, the initial loss in tempo, like spending an entire second turn on this, on a minion that doesn't that doesn't do anything immediately, basically. You don't even want to commit this to a battlefield, so it doesn't have any board impact, basically. So the 2 might are kind of doing nothing. You basically just spend 4 to do nothing. And even if the payoff is good, if it happens, I'm just not sure if it's not too easy to deal with then. And if you think about the might basically doing nothing because you don't want to commit this to a battlefield, you kind of have to use it 3 times to make up for it. And at that point, oh, boy, is it slow. I don't think so. Like if we get a deck that's really good at protecting this later down the line, maybe that maybe can for very little cost ready this up immediately, maybe, but I'm not seeing it. Next up, 4 energy, 1 power, 5 might, set Kingpin tank. I get +1 for each buffed friendly unit at my battlefield. Okay, this is kind of a big payoff card for the buff decks going wide, and with seeing it right here, Vanguard Helmet, this might also just be the better solution to the issue. Yes, it does not protect quite as well from like target removal, but with this having tank, this will just, when your opponent tries, when you move it to a battlefield with a lot of units, or your opponent tries to combat you at that battlefield, this will just soak up all the damage and make sure that your buffs do stay around, and I like that. We have to see if it's kind of maybe a little bit of a win more card, but on a champion that might just be always available. I don't know if that's that bad of a thing. Maybe just having the one in your champion slot to just slam down and finish the game could be good, and it can become really threatening. Yeah. Just either it's like a very good like last push, a last threat to close out the game, or it's a little bit too win more, but either way, interesting card and very interesting alt art. Then 4 energy, 2 power, 4 might, Spectral Matron. When you play me, you may play a unit costing no more than 3 and no more than 1 power from your trash, ignoring its cost. Huh. Yeah. Sounds pretty good. Just reviving something, particularly in like Death Knell kind of decks, or things like that, things that immediately have an effect, but playing this with like, I don't know, going back a little bit, a Vanguard Captain is actually a pretty interesting target for that, right? You played that, you get Legion immediately. That's definitely, I imagine there's definitely there are definitely some very interesting things that you can put down with this, and yeah, you basically just need something that makes up for the 2 power, and tempo wise I feel like there will be a lot of 3 energy 1 power drops that can make up for that. Then 4 energy, 4 might, Vanguard Sergeant, just a vanilla, and as such neither exciting nor particularly good. At best, it's the best thing you have right now in the early stages of the game, but from what I'm seeing so far, I really don't think that any of those vanillas will have any kind of playability. 4 energy, 2 power, Vengeance, kill a unit. Okay, 2 power cost, a little bit hefty, but just being able to out anything, anywhere, not only at battlefields, anything, anywhere, very powerful removal options that decks that can afford to play this will certainly enjoy. There's also the argument that at some point the aggressive strategies may go into just, well, when they're starting to run out of steam, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to keep your energy around, to just keep your runes around, right? You can just really recklessly use your runes for like high power cost cards that still generate some last pushes, some last tempo, and thinking like that, it might even make sense in some aggressive strategies, especially in slower matchup, like to just, once the slower deck really starts going, plays like the first really big threat, just start to convert your rune total into advantage, basically. Get into like tempo back to stay in the game, use that like delay the enemy just that little bit more that you need to squeeze out the win. Even in those kind of scenarios, I could see this card being pretty good. And next up, Victor Leader. 4 energy, 1 power, 4 might. When another non-recruit unit you control dies, play a recruit unit token into your base. Yeah. Pretty solid effect, works more than once per turn. Just makes sure that after going wide that your stuff stays around. This is also the kind of card like Lux that you do kind of want to keep in your base, but at 4 might it's just a lot more difficult to remove and a lot more useful to if you have to actually commit to a battlefield. Like for this it doesn't feel nearly as bad, and I think that makes it a lot more playable. Also, you can put this out and then run a bunch of your units immediately into a battlefield and get value of that, like from that immediately, which makes it even stronger as a champion unit. Like if you play Victor, you just have this always available to make sure if after your first 2-3 turns you have a lot of units, make sure that your board stays wide, that you will still have units stick around to buff, and that being always available is really powerful. This is a very strong card, and the fact that it's a champion that a deck can count on to always have one of accessible is phenomenal. The old art. And next up, 5 energy, 2 power, Imperial Decree. Action: when any unit takes damage this turn, kill it. Okay. This is interesting. It feels, for the fact that it doesn't do really a lot on its own, it feels a little bit expensive, but the potential here is quite insane. Either again in those token strategies when you have a lot of tokens going to a battlefield, or even just one slightly larger minion from which you just assign, just spread out the damage, 1 to each, make them kill it. It's also an action if your opponent moves into you. That could backfire quite heavily with this, although having 5 energy open during your opponent's turn might not be something you want to do a whole lot. And then there's also the synergy if we have like something that deals 1 to all units, playing this afterwards, just clearing everything. There's a lot of potential synergy with this that could make it pretty strong. Yeah. And now the images are missing for some reason. Weird. Machine Evangel. 5 energy, 1 power, 4 might, death knell. Play 3 1 recruit unit tokens into your base. Okay, this is a reasonably strong death knell. That might be in like one of the more interesting one as once there's synergy there. It's also obviously good as in token decks, especially as kind of a unit that makes your board a little bit stickier, make it not die immediately to just a single board clear, right? Even if all your units die, you get a couple back afterwards. It feels slightly expensive, but I think it might be alright. 5 energy, 5 might, assault +1, petty officer, just a French vanilla. Yeah, maybe if you don't find better 5 drops, maybe this can see play, but will be phased out rather quickly. 5 energy, 1 power, 4 might, Solari Chief. When you play me, choose an enemy unit. If it's stunned, kill it, otherwise stun it. Okay, this... I don't know. Maybe I'm underrating stun a little bit, but I feel like it's oftentimes a bit overcosted. Like you play this, stun a bigger unit on an enemy battlefield, then move there with your own unit, and in the situation where they have like just exactly the same might, or there are multiple units maybe, so that stunning the one allows you to take out the other, like those can all happen, but oftentimes you will just get 1 point from conquering, and then next turn your opponent will just move it back to there, take out whatever you have there, and go on with their day. With stun synergy, this killing something could become interesting, but all the stun strategies, they seem kind of all over the place, and then stun seems kind of a little bit awkward oftentimes, a little bit situational, and a little bit overvalued for what it does, in my opinion. Like from my impression right now, I haven't played with or against Leona yet, but Leona, I don't know if there are any other stun strategies than Leona. I imagine that Leona is the one that's particularly focused on things there. I don't know. This card, if like a stun deck really comes to be that has like a lot of synergy, additional payoffs to get off of stunning things, this definitely can work out as a card. But for the most part, it just seems slightly underwhelming, which is true for most of the stun cards, I feel like, and that's not a good sign. 6 energy, 1, especially going back to this, especially since I've also not really seen anything that stands out as something that could make this kind of strategy more than the sum of its parts. That's something I feel like right now the stun cards really need, and I am yet to see that. 6 energy, 1 power, blast off power, action, kill a unit at a battlefield. Okay, another strong removal option. A big upside over Vengeance is not only does it cost 1 less power, it's also an action, but it's only at a battlefield, and this is kind of the pros and cons. I don't really know how what kind of decks would want which card more in which situation, but this as well seems, at least in slower matchup, like a decent card. The fact that it's an action, like being able to just remove something big when your opponent moves to a battle, can really screw them over. So yeah, solid. Also, again, pretty solid removal option probably, provided that there are big enough units in the metagame. Maybe at that point more of a side deck option. Time will tell. Alright, Commander Lidros. 6 energy, 4 power, 8 might. Quite expensive power-wise. As you play me, you may kill any number of friendly units as an additional cost. Reduce my cost by 1 order power for each kill this way. Deflect and ganking. Okay, so this 4-stroke token strategies can be quite the big unit coming out relatively early and quite difficult to deal with. Deflect and ganking. This can be quite the scary thing to face, and yeah, if you can play this on turn 3, once you just have 6 runes with maybe just 1 or 2 reduction, maybe have some death knell things that, or tokens that are really expendable that maybe really want to die. Yeah, this is a card with a lot of potential. Next up, 6 energy, 1 power, 6 might, Darius Executioner. Legion, when you play me, ready me, other friendly units have +1 here. Okay, another card kind of as a payoff for going very wide, playing a lot of small things with it. The Legion effect, if this enters ready, is obviously really powerful, and if this can then out of nowhere immediately move with a lot of friendly units, that can definitely be very game ending. It might be a little bit more situational than the payoffs these buff token decks, like these token decks going wide want. But if a deck can consistently get into a situation where this works out, it's really strong, and I don't think that's completely unrealistic or anything. Next up, the low res alt art. It is pretty cool. Then 6 energy, 1 power, 5 might, Garen. Other friendly units have +1 here. Why did they do him so dirty? What? Isn't he just straight up way worse than Darius? What the? Huh? Was this supposed to have 5 might and this one 6, or what? What's going on here? Like, even if you don't get Darius's Legion effect, this is just, he's just better. And then you have the Legion utility, which is very strong on top of it. Why would you ever play Garen? Why would you play this card? The other Garen was also quite bad. They really did Garen quite dirty, I think. What the? So the only reason to play this is if you're playing a Garen Legend and have to choose this as your champion and just be very unhappy that you're Darius. You versus the guy she tells you not to worry about. What is this, man? Alright. 6 energy, 3 power, spell, Grand Stratagem. Action, give friendly units +5 this turn. All friendly units, no matter where they are, not just at that battlefield. You can buff both battlefields at the same time. Okay, this is kind of like, it is quite expensive, but it doesn't really matter that it's that expensive, because this is definitely one of those cards that for strategies going wide can really close out the game. This can be really game ending, and that's why I think this will be a good option for those strategies if they just need some more potential to close out the game. Next up, 6 energy, 1 power, 6 might, Karma Channeler. Vision, when you cycle 1 or more cards, buff a friendly unit. Okay, interesting effect. Has some potential. The fact that runes are not counted into this makes it a lot weaker. I didn't think they would be, but having clarified here is quite important. So this is kind of like, if you really go into the recycle strategy. The thing with this card is I don't think that it's bad. I'm just really not sure what kind of strategy would want this. It just seems so specific that I'm not quite I can't really imagine a deck where this really shines. Is kind of my situation right now. Maybe, who knows, maybe people or future sets will disprove me here, but I feel like Karma looks like a pretty decent card that will never find a home. 6 energy, 2 power, King's Edict. Starting with the next player, each other player chooses a unit you don't control that hasn't been chosen for this spell. Kill those units. Oh, so in 2v2, you just kill 2 units. Yes, your opponent gets to choose the other, but you get to choose one. That's quite strong, and it's only 2 energy more expensive than Vengeance here. And you can get to kill an entire additional unit. Again, you could also thin out your enemies, the opposing units first. Your own units cannot be affected, so it doesn't matter for that. It's obviously really insane in 4v4s with more players, but even in 2v2s this doesn't sound bad, particularly again as a side deck options against certain slow strategies or strategies that want to go pretty tall on just a few minions. This it's quite expensive, but this seems pretty good. Next up, 6 energy, 1 power, 5 might, Peak Guardian. When you play me, buff me, then if I'm at a battlefield, buff all other friendly units here. So it enters as a 6 might, kind of. It could be pretty strong to close out things, but he's more like you play him to a battlefield you already own, bolster things there, and then, well, try to hold it. Could be good enough for that, but I again feel like Darius will oftentimes just be better. 6 energy, spell recruit the Vanguard. Action, play 4 recruit tokens. They can be okay. The action part kind of makes it interesting, but just playing 4 tokens alone is not good enough. This is like the more kind of card that during a showdown you would want to combine with like a big AoE buff or something like that. Maybe then it has potential, but overall it seems a little bit underwhelming. Then 6 energy, 1 power, 5 might, Vanguard Attendant. I enter ready. Okay, the fact that it enters ready is pretty good. That alone for certain decks that really want that effect, because they then can buff up that Vanguard or use it for whatever, that might be interesting. But for most decks I feel like just for the 5 might, it might be a little bit too expensive. Next up, Divine Judgment. 7 energy, 2 power. Each player chooses 2 units, 2 gear, 2 runes, and 2 cards in their hand. Recycle the rest. Oh, this just resets the game. This is interesting. I'm not really interested, like this for something that has like some really powerful unit or gear that really regains you a lot of advantage. It could be really interesting. It's quite the wacky card in like 4v4s. There's potential for this card, although I really can't tell you how exactly. And then 8 energy, 2 power, 6 might, Harness Dragon. When you play me, kill an enemy unit. This seems solid. Has impact immediately. It's a little bit maybe on the expensive side, or maybe not. Just killing a unit if it's a slightly larger one, and having a 6 might body left is pretty strong actually, if the units are like at least some mid-size units. So seems like a pretty decent option, at least against like certain decks going tall or being a little bit on the slower side. And with that, we're through all the regular order cards. And order is not quite what I expected, like especially the Death Nurse synergy and things like that in here. It is pretty interesting. I'm The token synergy seems pretty good. I'm really, even with this, not sold on the stun synergy. The buff synergy seems fine, but also lacking a little bit sometimes. But quite a few interesting cards. So yeah, excited to see what people do with this. But bro, Garen got done so dirty against his rival Darius. Ah, man, it's sad. But whatever. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. With this, we have all the regular cards covered. We can go look into the legends, into specific decks, and the release is right around the corner, so stay tuned for that. Have a great time. See you.